Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas are boxers who play it to the bone.
And psych ward inmate Winona Ryder is the girl interrupted.
No, that's Hatsuamada.
In the Pacific Northwest, a romance begins between a Japanese-American girl and the son of the local newspaper editor. But then World War II intervenes and snow falling on Cedars. It's one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing this week, including Angela's Ashes. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Michaela Pereira of ZDTV's Internet Tonight. Well, it's good to be back in the balcony in the year 2000.
The year 2000 is starting out with our first movie, Snow Falling on Cedars, and this is one of those movies that kind of gathers you into its arms with a visual beauty that makes the story seem bittersweet, even though it's about hurt and loss. The movie is told in interlocking flashbacks, all descending from a secret high school romance between a Japanese-American girl named Hatsui and a white boy named Ishmael. When World War II begins, their love is threatened.
These people are our neighbors.
So make sure you paper up your windows, so the Japs won't find us.
They sent their sons to the United States Army. They're no more an enemy than our fellow islanders of German descent, of German or Italian descent.
You get the message?
That's Ethan Hawke as the high school student, Yuki Kudo is his girlfriend, and Sam Shepard is his father, an editor who condemns racial prejudice against the local citizens of Japanese descent. The U.S. government brutally ships off the Japanese-American community to internment camps. Ishmael asks Hatsui to marry him, but she refuses and goes behind barbed wire with her family. Hatsui marries in the internment camp, and a few years after the war, her husband is charged with a murder. By now, Ishmael is the local editor himself, and his heart still hurts because she wouldn't marry him.
Hatsu, are you all right?
Go away, Ishmael.
All of the legal and emotional threads come together at a trial where the great Swedish actor Max von Sydow plays the defense attorney.
You might think that this is a small trial in a small place. Well, it isn't. Every once in a while, somewhere in the world, humanity goes on trial.
Snow Falling on Cedars is the first film since Shine from the Australian director Scott Hicks, and it confirms his standing as a filmmaker who feels real empathy with his characters. The screenplay is by Ron Bass and Hicks, based on the bestseller by David Guterson, and it weaves together strands of romance, crime, justice, and prejudice, and cuts back and forth in time to follow its various stories, and yet we always know just where we stand. Setting the tone for everything is Robert Richardson's evocative photography, with snow and rain so real you can almost touch it.
This was a war story for me, besides a love story and a murder trial, but the war story, the internment of the Japanese, still a very fresh wound in the country that we live in now, and it was impressive how he handled this, reminding us of this important segment of our history. The scene that will forever live with me is the scene of the Japanese-American citizens of that town walking by the other Anglo citizens with their pride and their dignity intact, carrying what possessions they could off to internment camp.
It's a very powerful scene. A lot of people don't even know about that shameful chapter in our history, and this movie is important in showing that. But what I like about the interlocking story is that, in a way, all of this story takes place at once. The fact that they were teenagers in love, what happened during the war, who they are now, the murder, the trial, the racial prejudice, the feelings in the town to this day, all come together in that courtroom. And of course, Max von Sydow brings it all to a head.
Brilliantly.
And it really is constructed in a way to show us how everything is connected.
And it's very clear. Often those times when you cut back and forth through time, you get lost, but you're always clear of where it's going. Well, moving on now, our next movie is Play It to the Bone. And in this testosterone-soaked buddies on a road trip movie, Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas star as two middleweight boxers who are given the opportunity of a lifetime, a comeback. Neither has been a contender in years, and they aren't getting any younger. So they jump at the chance to be the undercard fight for a Tyson main event. Problem is, they're in Los Angeles, and the fight is in Las Vegas the same night. What ensues is a desperate race to get to Sin City. Here, Banderas, playing the suave Cesar, turns on the charm as he tries to convince his girlfriend, Grace, to lend her car. She's played by Lolita Davidovich.
In Vegas.
In Vegas.
Tonight.
Tonight, yeah, that's right.
And you want me to go with you?
Of course I want you to come with me. I need you. I need your eyes, I need your skin, and I need your hair.
You need my car.
I need your car.
Deciding she could do some networking in Vegas, Grace joins the boys, and the three hit the road. Add to the motley mix a sultry, streetwise hitchhiker, played by Lucy Liu. Sassy and defiant, she pushes all the wrong buttons.
I just don't like you. Oh. Oh. I don't like you either.
The movie culminates with a bloody battle between the two men, which practically upstages the main event.
Demonstrating to the crowd that he got his energy back after having been on his back on the canvas twice in the first round. There's a cut above the left eye of Vince Boudreau.
Vince, it's a nothing cut. Forget about it. Just throw some jabs.
Play It to the Bone got a big ho-hum from me. The road trip, which accounted for the majority of the movie, was boring. And not only that, but the characters didn't even come to any sort of pat conclusions about life or love. They just were. I did enjoy the insider view the movie afforded us of the boxing world, and the actual fight had me almost on the edge of my seat. But I'm afraid that wasn't enough to keep me from giving Play It to the Bone a thumbs down.
You know, my thumb is down too, and I'm kind of disappointed because Ron Shelton, who wrote and directed this, knows a lot about sports, and he also made White Men Can't Jump, which was one of Woody Harrelson's first great roles. But here, there's a crucial problem, and that is, first of all, the fight goes on forever, and it's just a bloody, gruesome slugfest, far beyond, I think, at least, the capacity of any two people to remain on their feet. They would have been dead. And here's the other problem. We like both fighters. We don't want either one to win because we don't want either one to lose.
And neither do the characters.
So who do we root for? And then at the end, there's a very unsatisfactory conclusion, no matter what point of view you take, so that you don't walk out of the movie feeling happy. At the end of a fight, somehow there should be release.
Well, and add to that, can I just complain about the characters that they posted, these women? Grace, first off, she's this woman who drives this green muscle car, yet is able to dress up real pretty in a hot red dress, obviously picked by a man, okay? And continuing in my feminist rant, Lucy Liu, she's mouthy, she's hard, and she's easy. Neither of these women particularly added anything to this movie that was already lacking.
Well, you know, the muscle car probably comes from Ron Shelton because there's an unwritten rule in all road pictures that you have to find a retro 50s or 60s car to get in, and then you have... Why didn't they fly to Vegas? Because you needed the road movie. Okay, later in the show, Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted.
I guess I'm puzzled as to why it is I have to be in a mental institution.
Coming up next, Emily Watson in Angela's Ashes.
Have we moved again, Frankie? No, they wouldn't go without the Pope.
Frank McCourt and his younger brother Malachi run home to a flooded slum dwelling in that scene from Angela's Ashes, based on his best-selling memoir of growing up in poverty in Limerick. Their home is held together by their long-suffering mother Angela, played by Emily Watson, who somehow tries to keep them warm and fed and get them off to school, while her husband, played by Robert Carlyle, each week drinks up whatever money he can get his hands on.
I'll change.
The dole is 19 shillings and the rent is 6, and that leaves 13 shillings to feed and clothe 5 people.
Catholicism is at the very heart of the story, combined with a skeptical but typical Irish anti-clerical air. Joe Breen plays Little Frank.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a minute since my last confession.
A minute? Are you the boy that was just here?
I am, Father.
What is it now?
My grandma says holy water or ordinary water. He says ordinary water, and don't go bothering him again.
Now, the look of the movie is just about perfect, but still, I had a question about it. I was familiar with Angela's Ashes because I'd listened to the audiobook, which is read by Frank McCourt himself and vibrates with humor, heart, passion, and nostalgia. Then I went to the movie and found it curiously flat. And One of my problems was with the narrator, who, for reasons that are inexplicable to me, is not Frank McCourt, but an actor named Andrew Bennett, who describes events in a voice that simply fails to evoke them in the same way. Listen here to Andrew Bennett.
He was the Holy Trinity, was my dad, with 3 people in him. The one in the morning with his tea and woodbines telling us the stories. The one who tried so hard to find work but never did. And the one who came home at night with the smell of whiskey on him.
And now listen to Frank McCourt himself.
I think my father is like the Holy Trinity with 3 people in him. The one in the morning with the paper, the one at night with the stories and the prayers, and then the one who does the bad thing and comes home with the smell of whiskey and wants us to die for Ireland.
When I listen to those 2 voices, I have to paraphrase Mark Twain. Bennett knows the words, but not the music. And watching this film was a curious experience for me because the story of Angela's Ashes is a grim and depressing one, but the book, and for that matter the audiobook, were filled with life, energy, and indomitable humor. But the movie is simply grim and depressing, and the spirit somehow has been mislaid.
I am surprised and I'm disappointed because I disagree with you.
Okay.
I felt the movie is terribly, terribly sad. Seeing the poverty and the plight of these Irish people suffering way below the poverty line shows that we cannot even begin to understand what poverty really is like in America. But the voice to me was just sort of like icing on the cake. The story itself and the images were so sad and so wrapped me into them that I felt compassion for these people. I did find it depressing, but there was always a belief that things could get better. The young boy, Malachi, and his brother Frank, both were a hope for me.
For me, the humor and the hope that is so much a part of the book is kind of in the last third of the movie. In the first 2/3 of the movie, you're just sitting there wishing it would stop raining. I just found it, as I said, depressing.
Did you not disagree? You can't disagree with me, though, that Emily Watson was brilliant in this movie. She has
fabulous.
such screen presence.
Yes,
Very different from her role in Hillary and Jackie and in Breaking the Waves, but she has such brilliant performance in this movie.
Yes, she does. In fact, I loved all of the actors, so I just had that one complaint. Coming up next, Winona Ryder plays a troubled teenager whose writing career is launched as a girl interrupted.
The best place in the world for someone like you is less than a half an hour from here.
You don't mean Claymore?
Susanna, 4 days ago, you chased a bottle of aspirin with a bottle of vodka.
I had a headache.
That's Winona Ryder as a sullen and morose teenager in denial that she needs psychiatric help. Directed by James Mangold, the aptly named Girl Interrupted is a simply told, touching story about a young woman and her struggle to find her place in the world. The insecurity and confusion so typical of girls her age, coupled with a very tense relationship with her parents, earned Susanna the dubious diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and lands her in a psychiatric treatment center.
Where's Jamie? Where's Jamie? Who are you?
Her name is Susanna Lisa. She smokes 4 cigarettes.
Huh? Why? Why? Where's Jamie? You don't know why.
Susanna is befriended by the girls on the ward, among them the charming, subversive, and dangerously influential Lisa, played by Angelina Jolie.
Social contrariness and a generally pessimistic attitude are often observed. Oh, that's me.
That's everybody.
Whoopi Goldberg is a voice of reason in Susanna's world. She plays the no-nonsense nurse who, in this scene, shares some words of wisdom with the anguished girl.
How the hell am I supposed to recover when I don't even understand my disease?
But you do understand it. You spoke very clearly about it a second ago. But I think what you gotta do is put it down, put it away, put it in your notebook, but get it out of yourself.
Mental illness is a sensitive issue and one that isn't particularly cut and dried. Everyone faces challenges, and this movie made me once again realize how fragile the human mind and spirit can be. But aside from the topic, for me, the true strength of this movie lay in the storytelling. Nothing particularly fancy, just simply put. Add to that an excellent cast with Ryder and Jolie leading the way. I give Girl Interrupted a firm thumbs up.
And I give it a reluctant thumbs down, and I'll tell you, I really did like the performances. Angelina Jolie has a real presence on the screen,
Does she?
And Winona Ryder has been one of our smartest and best actresses for several years now. But you know, the book is based on a journal, and the movie seems to have the same kind of episodic structure in which we don't know really where it's going or what the payoff is going to be. One problem is that obviously this girl interrupted doesn't belong there, and so that's wrong, and yet at the same time her own personality is so frustrating that we don't know exactly which way to push her. At one point, Whoopi Goldberg, who plays the nurse, says you're just a spoiled little brat, you know, and you ought to just get up and get your act together. And then at the end, there's a lot of melodrama that seemed to me kind of laid on and brought in from outside.
Don't you agree that she did have some problems? She made some bad choices. I mean, she chased a bottle of aspirin with a bottle of vodka.
You shouldn't do that.
You shouldn't do that. That's wrong.
But I'm not sure you should spend 2 years in an institution because of that.
And that was, that to me was the most important part of this. The tumultuous 60s. I mean, this was a great sort of reaction to what was going on. It was a crazy world. And it's hard to tell if she was crazy. Was the world around her crazy?
Well, all of that is in there. To me, it just didn't pay off. At the end of the film, I was thinking they didn't have a clear idea of their destination, and so they couldn't take me along with them. I'm still left with the people, in a way, still in the asylum. They didn't get out either figuratively or symbolically.
Well, my concern is people are going to write this off as a chick flick because I disagree with you. I think this is a movie that is worth its weight.
Okay, when we come back, the last days of a young woman who has volunteered for a suicide mission in The Terrorist. Whenever I hear about someone choosing to become a human bomb, I wonder what goes through the mind of a person like that. How do they feel about sacrificing their lives, and what are the days and moments like that lead up to the explosion? An extraordinary new film named The Terrorist looks through the eyes of a 19-year-old Indian woman who's been recruited for a suicide mission. The leader of her group gives her a briefing. That's Aisha Dakar as Mali, the young terrorist. She's sent to a safe house in the country to wait for her mission, and there she meets a loquacious farmer and his assistant, who are self-styled philosophers with opinions on everything. I like these guys.
இந்த பூமி அப்படியே பூவா சிரிக்கிற மாதிரி இருக்குமா
The farmer has a beloved wife who has not moved since she had a stroke 5 years earlier. Mali somehow feels close to her and asks her advice.
Mali?
The Terrorist is the first film written and directed by Santosh Sivan, a gifted Indian cinematographer. You can see his mastery of the camera and the way he creates the mood for his story through the eyes of his actress, who must reflect thoughts that she cannot share with anyone. Finally, all the waiting is over, and Mali is faced with the moment of truth in a film that puts a human face on the anonymous terrorists that we read about in the headlines.
I've never been so affected by watching a movie. This movie stuck with me all week. Out of all of the movies we've reviewed, this was my favorite. The idea of a suicide bomber is so barbaric, yet they managed to walk the line of humanizing this person and making us sort of feel compassion towards her, but also despising what she's doing. A perfect example of hating the sin and not the sinner. They were just loaded with symbolism, the water, the children, the life, because they're talking about life here and the value of it.
I think it was probably inspired by the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, but I think it's very wise that the movie never mentions who the target is or names the group or gets into the ideology. It's about this woman and her personality. And then what he does is he constructs the story in such a way that it's a tug of war between life and death.
I was always being constantly pulled from one side to the other.
I really think it's important. It's called The Terrorist, and it's going to be opening around the country in the weeks to come. We'll be right back. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this week's show. 2 thumbs up for Snow Falling on Cedars, the story of wartime love and prejudice. 2 thumbs down for Play It to the Bone, a boxing movie that fails in the finish. We split on Angela's Ashes. Michaela really liked the portrait of Irish poverty, but I thought some of the spirit was missing. We split again on Girl Interrupted. Michaela was greatly moved by the film. I liked the performances, but thought the story derailed at the end. Finally, two thumbs way up for The Terrorist. I hope people go and look for it.
I was just going to say, if my wish for 2000 could be, is that more people would see this movie worldwide.
And Snow Falling on Cedars, another good one. Thanks
Definitely.
a lot for being here.
It's been nice to be here again, Roger.
Remember, you can hear our reviews on the web at ebert-movies.com, both Michaela and I. That's part of Go Network. And my print reviews are online at suntimes.com/Ebert. Next week, reviews of more new movies, including Simpatico, a crime story starring Jeff Bridges, Nick Nolte, and Sharon Stone. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Please pass the Polaner all fruit.
Would you please pass the all fruit?
Naturally delicious Polaner all fruit, sweetened only with fruit juice.
For serious oral care, use Rembrandt Whitening Toothpaste. For extra whitening with less abrasion. For a healthier mouth, for the life of your teeth. Rembrandt Toothpaste.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The Diet System 6 program fights fat 6 different ways. Works for me.
Meatballs and mozzarella, wrapped in the crispy crust of Lean Pockets, with only 7 grams of fat. Meatballs and mozzarella from Lean Pockets.
Closed captioning for Roger Ebert and the Movies is brought to you.